Think about the last time you tried to force your team or, even yourself to be more consistent.
Right, like trying to hit a quarterly business goal or finally stick to a marketing strategy.
Yeah, exactly. Or just keeping basic communication from breaking down. Usually, what do? We call this massive meeting, hype everyone up, and basically demand more effort.
We tell everyone they just need to care more.
Right. And, well, it probably failed. So we are launching into a deep dive today that completely upends that whole instinct.
It really does. It challenges the very foundation of how we think about effort.
We're looking at a really insightful piece of writing from Stella Pop. It's called Cadence is the Operating System of Consistency. And their main argument is that sheer effort is actually the enemy of consistency.
Which sounds completely backwards, I know. But it highlights this fundamental misunderstanding of how organizations actually function.
Because we tend to view consistency as like a moral character trait.
Exactly. We assume that if a team isn't executing consistently, they must lack discipline.
Yeah.
Or, they just aren't motivated enough.
But as the source points out, willpower is finite.
It's totally finite. When you step into the real world, the absolute best intentions just evaporate the minute an organization gets genuinely busy.
Oh, for sure. The phone rings, a client is upset, a server goes down, and suddenly that beautiful strategic plan you all agreed on, it just vanishes.
Precisely. The dashboard stops getting reviewed, the follow-up slip. The strategy still exists on paper, but the actual execution completely fractures.
And the critical insight here is that it doesn't break because the team lacks talent.
No, it breaks because consistency isn't something you can just force through willpower. It's an outcome.
Right. And if you want that outcome, the mechanism you actually need to build is cadence.
That's the secret. Cadence is the engine.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because if sheer effort is the wrong approach, we have to look at the alternative. And it's this exhausting alternative most companies default to.
Which the source calls random intensity.
Random intensity. And the mechanics of this are something we have all lived through. A business realizes things have gotten a bit slack, so they go incredibly hard for 1 week.
Right. They launch a massive campaign or force the sales team to call every prospect in the pipeline by Friday.
Yeah, or everyone spends their whole weekend cleaning up the CRM, and then nothing.
It just fades.
Yeah.
And it creates this tremendous amount of motion, but virtually zero sustainable momentum.
Because operating at that level takes an immense amount of energy.
It takes huge emotional force, yeah. You're requiring your people to operate way, way above their normal baseline capacity.
It totally reminds me of crash dieting. Or like cramming the night before a huge exam.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Right. Like you stay up all night drinking energy drinks, cramming information into your brain. You might pass the test the next day, but you're exhausted and you forget everything by next week.
Exactly. You can't live like that.
No. But compare that to, say, studying for 20 minutes a day, or joining a weekly study group, or just taking a daily walk instead of trying to run a marathon off the couch.
That's the cadence. It's sustainable. And what's crucial to understand is that growing companies are especially vulnerable to this random intensity trap.
Because they're used to rushing.
Well, yeah. In the early days of a startup, running on pure urgency actually works. It's often founder-led. It's highly relationship-driven.
So survival basically depends on everyone swarming a problem the second it appears.
Exactly. That urgency helps you survive. But survival isn't the same thing as scaling.
That's a really good point.
Urgency is a survival instinct, but scaling requires a reliable rhythm. You have to know how the business operates when nobody is feeling particularly inspired.
Right. How do sales happen when the founder isn't in the room to personally chase down every single opportunity?
Exactly. If an organization relies on the adrenaline of random intensity forever, the entire system eventually burns out.
Because if you only act when you desperately need results, you are only ever reacting to emergencies.
You're just putting out fires.
And if a business only reacts to loud, massive, urgent fires, it completely ignores the quiet problems.
And those quiet problems just sit there until they morph into loud problems.
The text actually uses a very specific word for this that really stuck out to me. Drifting.
Drifting. Yeah, that's a great concept.
Business problems rarely arrive with fireworks. They drift in quietly. Pipelines get soft quietly,
Profit margins tighten by a fraction of a percent quietly.
Employee frustration builds up very quietly. Drift is such an intentional word choice there because it implies a total lack of friction.
Right. No one is actively trying to fail. They just aren't steering.
Exactly. You don't wake up one morning completely off track. You drift there.
You drift there through 100 missed check-ins, delayed decisions, instances where ownership just wasn't clear.
And without that cadence, leaders are basically managing by surprise.
They only find out a prospect went cold after the deal is already dead and buried.
Or they only realize a client is unhappy when the contract doesn't renew.
What's fascinating here is the psychological shift that a proper cadence creates.
How do you mean?
Well, cadence like having a reliable weekly sales review or a monthly client health check, it doesn't magically eliminate problems.
All right. The market will still shift.
Clients will still have issues, yeah. But a cadence gives those problems a predictable place to show up earlier.
Ah, I see.
It moves the business from a state of constant stressful reaction to a state of proactive visibility.
So it basically gives the business a way to see itself.
Exactly. It operates as an early warning system. You catch the drift before the ship runs aground.
And because you're catching those quiet drifts early, you're actually eliminating the one thing that burns teams out faster than anything else.
Workplace drama.
Yes, workplace drama. The system absorbs the panic. Because when a business has no rhythm, absolutely everything feels urgent.
Every minor issue suddenly demands an emergency meeting.
Every delayed decision feels like a full-blown crisis, and every missed handoff feels like a personal attack between departments.
Because there's no underlying architecture to hold those issues. Without a system, everything is a fire drill.
Right. And the source outlines how Cadence actively reduces this drama by creating what it calls containers.
Containers.
Yeah, think of containers as designated protected spaces for specific types of work or specific types of problems.
So sales issues don't need to hijack the whole day. They belong in the sales cadence container.
Exactly. Operational blockers belong in the leadership cadence container. Team capacity issues go into the staffing cadence.
This means not every single problem has to be solved right now in a frantic Slack thread.
Or, a hallway ambush. Or sitting in the founder's overflowing email inbox.
It completely changes the expectation of how work gets done.
It really does. Like, if I have a problem on Tuesday, but I know our operational container is on Thursday morning, I don't need to panic.
You know there's a dedicated time and space to address it.
Right. And consider the tremendous burden that takes off the leadership.
Oh, it's massive. Because without a cadence, the leader often accidentally becomes the entire company's operating system.
Every question routes through them.
Every priority competes for their immediate attention. A healthy cadence moves a business away from personality-driven execution towards system-driven execution.
But here's where it gets really interesting, though, because I have to push back a little on this idea of containers.
Okay, go for it.
If I go to a team that is already overwhelmed and I tell them we are creating designated meeting containers for every single issue, they will mutiny.
Oh, absolutely. They'd hate it.
Right, because it sounds dangerously close to corporate bureaucracy. We have all suffered through those soul-crushing, rigid, standing meetings that honestly could have easily been an email.
Yeah, the ones where everyone just stares at the clock.
Exactly. So how is a cadence actually different from just strangling the team in red tape?
It is a vital question, and it's the trap that a lot of companies fall into when they try to implement this. They completely overcomplicate it.
They add like 50 new dashboards.
And a whole suite of mandatory reports. And you're right, it just becomes bureaucratic noise. But the source gives a very explicit warning about this. Cadence is not rigidity.
The danger is confusing the two.
Exactly. Rigidity says, this is how we do it, no matter what, even if it makes absolutely no sense today.
It replaces critical thinking with a schedule.
Right. It serves the system rather than the outcome. But a disciplined cadence, on the other hand, says, this is the rhythm we maintain so we can stay clear-headed enough to make better decisions.
So cadence is supposed to support good judgment, not replace it.
Exactly. It should create clarity, never bureaucracy.
So what does that actually look like in practice? Because the text lays out a rule for a healthy cadence, and it's beautifully counterintuitive.
It really is.
It says a good cadence should be boring, useful, and repeatable.
Boring is not the enemy here. Boring is the point.
Right. You do not need a brand new cutting-edge operating model every single quarter. You just need a rhythm people can trust.
And it doesn't need to be some elaborate 3-hour slide deck presentation. In fact, if it is, you've probably drifted into rigidity.
The text basically boils a functional cadence down to just 5 simple questions. If your container, your meeting, your review can answer these 5 questions, you have a solid mechanism.
Let's walk through them because the mechanics of why these work are brilliant.
Okay, number 1, what are we reviewing?
Right, so that sets the absolute boundary of the container. We aren't here to talk about everything. We are here to talk about this specific metric or project.
Keep it focused. Number 2, what changed?
That isolates the delta. Instead of relitigating the entire history of a project, you only focus on what moved since the last container.
Oh, that saves so much time. Number 3, what needs attention?
Triage. It forces the team to identify the friction points without getting defensive.
Number 4, who owns the next step?
Pure accountability. A problem without an owner is really just a complaint.
That's a great way to put it. And finally, number 5, when will we check again?
Which closes the container. It sets the exact moment the next cycle begins, so no one has to wonder or worry about when the issue is going to be revisited.
If we look at those 5 questions, what are we reviewing? What changed? What needs attention? Who owns the next step? When will we check again? They strip away the ego.
They strip away the finger pointing entirely.
They focus completely on visibility and accountability.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you really start to see why simple cadence beats complicated ambition every single time.
Because it's actually sustainable.
And predictability breeds trust, both internally among the team and externally with the market. Trust isn't formed through one massive heroic moment.
It's built through repeated proof. People believe patterns. Clients trust companies that communicate before a problem arises. Markets trust brands that show up repeatedly with a clear point of view.
Not just one random viral post every 2 months.
Exactly. If you only follow up when you suddenly remember to, you aren't building buyer trust. The business becomes easier to trust simply because it becomes easier to understand.
So if we take these mechanics, the 5 questions, the boring and repeatable containers, we need to look at how they actually map onto the moving parts of an organization.
The source highlights a few critical areas where applying this rhythm is basically non-negotiable if a business wants to scale. So what does this all mean in practice? Let's get really granular, starting with sales.
Okay, sales.
The text points out that in sales, leads naturally decay. Let's picture this. A highly qualified prospect reaches out on a Friday, incredibly excited.
Great news.
But if there is no cadence, the sales team might get bogged down with other client work on Monday. By Wednesday, the prospect has cooled off. And by next week, they've forgotten you exist.
They aren't going to wait around for your business to get organized.
No. Consistency in sales requires a strict rhythm of contact, review, and clear next steps.
If you have a boring, repeatable Tuesday morning sales review that asks what needs attention and who owns the next step, that Friday lead cannot slip through the cracks.
The container catches the drift before the lead decays.
But that sales rhythm is useless if the pipeline is empty.
True. Which brings us to the mechanism of marketing.
Right. The source emphasizes that visibility compounds. You cannot just market when you happen to have a little extra free time.
Or when revenue suddenly dips.
That goes right back to random intensity. Writing 5 blog posts in one manic weekend and then going silent for 3 months does not build authority.
Authority requires a steady metronome.
The market needs to see you consistently to trust that you're a permanent fixture in the industry, not just a flash in the pan.
Let's apply this to the client experience too.
Yeah.
Because this is where the container concept really shines.
Oh, absolutely.
If your clients only ever hear from you when there is a massive crisis or when you are sending them an invoice.
Or when it's time for renewal.
Right. That is an incredibly fragile relationship.
Because a client rarely wakes up angry one sudden morning. They drift into dissatisfaction over months.
Maybe communication was a little slow one week.
Maybe a deliverable was slightly off the next.
But a regular communication cadence, like a monthly health check or a quarterly strategy review, that gives you the chance to stay ahead of those quiet issues.
You're checking the drift together.
Then we have operations, which is essentially the transmission of the business.
Right.
The source points out that in operations, small inefficiencies become incredibly expensive over time. Imagine a scenario where a key vendor starts delaying shipments by just 1 day.
Without a cadence, no one really notices because everyone is busy fighting their own daily fires.
Right, the team just absorbs the slight delay and works a little harder to compensate.
Exactly. But 6 weeks later, those one-day delays have compounded, and suddenly you are missing a massive Q3 launch deadline.
But if there had been a simple, boring, repeatable operational review that asked what changed, Someone would have flagged the vendor delay in week 2.
The cadence catches the operational drift before it completely derails the company.
And we absolutely cannot forget leadership and culture.
Well, this is huge.
Without a regular rhythm for reviewing priorities, leaders just end up reacting to whoever is yelling the loudest.
The loudest problem gets the budget, while the most important strategic initiative just starves.
Cadence separates the actual signal from the emotional noise.
And the insight on culture really shifted my perspective too. The text makes it very clear that your culture isn't the inspirational poster on the wall.
It isn't the core value statement buried in the employee handbook.
Teams take their absolute cues from rhythm.
Yes. If your communication is random, if your feedback is random, and if your accountability is random, your culture will be random too.
The cadence is what proves to the team what actually matters to the organization.
Right. You can say you value professional development, but if there's no cadence for reviewing it,
The team knows it isn't a real priority.
So what does this all mean? The text lays down a final challenge for leaders that is incredibly clarifying. You have to build the rhythm before you demand the result.
It is the most common leadership mistake we see. A manager gets frustrated and says, I want this team to communicate better, but they haven't built a predictable communication rhythm.
They demand that sales follow up faster, but there is no structured sales cadence.
They want fewer operational surprises, but there's no regular review container.
You cannot demand consistency until you build the mechanical conditions where consistency can actually survive.
You have to install the fuel injector.
Exactly. You have to create the rhythm, keep it boring and simple, protect it from the urge to be rigid, and continually run it. Consistency isn't magic.
No, and it isn't a personality trait.
And it certainly isn't a byproduct of just trying harder.
Not at all.
So, to wrap things up today, what this deep dive into Stella Pop's methodology shows us is that consistency is simply the result of reliable behavior supported by a rhythm.
It's a rhythm that a business can genuinely sustain without burning out its people.
Cadence truly is the operating system.
This raises an important question, though, and it's a final thought I want to leave you with.
Okay, let's hear it.
The source focuses entirely on cadence in the context of business operations. But consider what happens if we apply this exact same mechanical framework to our personal lives.
Oh, wow.
If a disciplined cadence lowers drama in a business by putting quiet problems into scheduled containers, how much of our own personal anxiety or our interpersonal conflicts could we eliminate?
Applying the 5 questions to life outside of work.
Exactly. What if we stopped relying on random intensity in our personal relationships, our health goals, or our finances?
Like crash dieting, as we said earlier.
Right. What if, instead of waiting for a personal crisis or a massive argument to force us into action, we just built a reliable, slightly boring cadence for the things that matter most to us?
Checking the drift before it impacts our own well-being.
Exactly.
That is a phenomenal lens to view your own week through. Are you trying to flood the engine to force your way through your goals, or are you building a reliable cadence?
Something to think about.
Thank you so much for joining us on today's deep dive. Take a look at your own routines this week, both at work and at home, and see where you might be relying on exhausting effort instead of a sustainable rhythm. We'll see you next time.